Welcome to Between the Sheets podcast, where we explore midlife and everything in between with Dr. Samantha Worthington and Brendan Neal.
Hello, Brendan.
Samantha, great to have you here again.
Great to be here, as always. Very entertaining.
I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
I'm a bit nervous, actually.
Are you?
Yeah, I am. I think we will have very differing views.
I hope so. We've got to bring something exciting to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we haven't prepared for this one. Like we have, however, we haven't prepared together.
No.
On purpose.
Yeah.
Like I even said to you, don't tell me what the questions are. I want to be shocked when you say them.
Yeah.
Yeah?
You know what I like about these podcasts or these discussions we've been having?
What?
Is that as well as just flying pretty loosely, a lot of it is so funny to me because it highlights the challenges that I have in improving my life.
I know.
And I'm not coming as an expert or anything. I'm just like tripping over and stumbling through this. So if anyone's tuning in for the first time, just be assured this isn't advice and I'm not saying how it rolls, and certainly for myself, I don't have any of this mastered.
We're learning as we're going.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot too.
Okay.
You know, every day.
Yeah.
That I spend with you. So what are we talking about today?
Oh.
Yeah. We are talking about imposed roles or assumed roles based on gender. And I'm ready. I'm ready for this one.
This is a hot topic for you.
On.
This is a hot topic, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's so many things that come into this. Gender, culture, race, there's just experience, education. We were chatting about a book that I've recently picked up. There were things in there that when I read them, I realized I'm actually not on my own in this type of thinking, and I'm not crazy, and other women have these thoughts too, which is why there's a book written about it, right? And the book was called How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids.
Yeah.
It's by Jancy Dunn, which is interesting because that's my mother-in-law's maiden name.
I think a lot of women would just catch on to that title straight away. How not to hate your husband after children.
Should we jump into some of those points?
Yeah. Bring them on.
So,
remind me again.
Right. So the one that came up was the fact that the additional workload or the mental workload of women after having children, you know, the concern for every detail of running the home and the children's lives and the husband's life and her own life while working full time, that mental load, right, doesn't make her crazy. It's actually real. Because I think a lot of women think they're going crazy, like just after having kids. So I've got three, right? I've got an 18-year-old, a 13-year-old now, and a 7-year-old. So it's been like 7 years since I've had a little one. However, I remember very clearly thinking, hey, I feel like I'm totally overwhelmed, and my husband is still doing all his sport and going to gym and going to work, and everything was carrying on. And I was like thinking, this can't be right, thinking I was going crazy. And I don't think that's something that's very foreign to other women. I think that happens. Did that happen in your marriage?
Oh, I wasn't even going to say a thing. How good is it for a man to realise that he needs to look after his mental health and physical health at the same time? So he still goes to the gym.
I think
that's smart, isn't it?
It's what?
That's smart, isn't it? Isn't that a smart thing to do?
I think that's an escape thing.
You felt that you didn't have that same escape. Is that what you're saying?
No, especially when you're breastfeeding, right? You can't really flick the child off and off you go for an afternoon of golf. So tell us about your experience. So let's look at point.
Oh, no, I was interested in yours.
Yeah, no, I know. What was yours like? You've got two boys.
Yeah.
Yeah? So what was that like? Do you feel as a man?
Yes. As a man.
As a husband, who your wife, you know, if she had read that book, your wife at the time, she had read that book, it would be How Not to Hate You After Kids. Do you think on that point that you were average or what?
I think in all areas of life, it is so easy to compare yourself to someone who's less than you or so much better than you.
Oh,
Yeah. So
that's
I could
really
quite easily
interesting.
now talk about all the great things that I thought I did
Yeah.
in the early days as a father.
Okay.
And if you were to ask the boy's mum, I'm sure that she may have a differing view at some stage. What I can say is that there was an emergency birth for our first son. And so some complications and you're out of action for a little while having,
You're out of action?
No,
I
I
was
was.
the mum, your ex-wife.
Yeah.
Right,
So
okay.
the boy's mum was out of action for a while, as
Okay.
in, something that many women listening to this can relate to, having a cesarean or some other complications around that as well, which slow you down. So I was very hands-on at the beginning with
Now, what does
changing
hands-on
nappy,
mean to you? Like, what does that mean? Were you
changing.
breastfeeding?
No, I didn't have that capacity. Yeah.
So what does
Oh,
that
I
mean?
would sort of wake up in sympathy for a while. I wouldn't
Really?
necessarily get up and stay up the whole time. It might have happened occasionally. Not really, no.
Okay.
There is a disparity with that for certain.
Yeah.
For certain. However, with like changing nappies and doing that sort of thing, I was always what I consider an independent, domesticated man, well before I was married.
Your wife at the time, did she work?
Not when she had the child, yeah.
Okay.
When she had
The
our
child.
son, the child, the golden child.
Okay, yeah.
So I have two boys. We have two boys. For a period of time after both of those births, no, their mum didn't work. Yeah.
I did.
And
I worked with all my kids.
now I know that you didn't only just work. Yeah, it's actually a bit, well, it's funny in some respects.
Is
And
it?
then, well, amusing.
Okay,
Because
interesting.
you laugh when you talk
Interesting.
about it as well.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to pick out whether this is your first son, which is your middle child, or the last son, where you...
Definitely the last. Yeah.
Okay, here's the scenario that I remember
Okay.
you sharing with me. You gave birth maybe on a Thursday or Friday? Is that
Oh,
right?
that's my middle one over a long weekend.
The middle one, that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And you went back
I
to
went
work.
back to work the next week.
Yeah, the next week.
Yeah, and it was a cesarean.
And a cesarean, yeah.
And all the medical doctors
Yeah.
right now are shaking their heads.
Yes, and midwives and
Every mother.
every mum
Everyone is
that's listening to
disappointed.
this. I might be jumping around here on your stories. Didn't you just give birth like 2 weeks ago or something? And you're
I think it
back
was
here
about
like
I
trying
think
to
it was
push
about
everyone around the
4
boardroom?
weeks. It was about 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, that's right. I remember quite clearly doing a presentation. This was after my first child, so I was really young and wearing those milk pads on my breast because I was still breastfeeding and they were leaking through my shirt and I had to cover up my shirt with my jacket. Yeah, so I was definitely not one of those balanced women ever when I had my children. It definitely took its toll.
Okay.
At the end of the day, yeah, for sure.
So when we look at these points from that book
Mm-hmm.
of how not to hate your husband,
Right.
did you choose to go? You're basically saying you chose to go back to work like that.
I think that my setup was a bit different and in if we're talking about gender roles, so my first child, I had to go back to work because I was separated from her dad and going through a divorce after she was a few weeks old. So I had to go back to work, and that was something that had to be done because it was not a safe marriage for me, and I had to go back to work to support myself and my daughter in order to leave the marriage. And I think that form of independence as a woman, definitely didn't come from my upbringing because culturally that wasn't how we were raised. However, I took that into my next marriage and the father of my boys to make sure that I was financially independent, probably based on the experience that I'd had with my first child, making sure that I could look after us financially if I had to, if I was in an unsafe space and I needed to look after my kids. And money is important to a woman. That's something that I coach women on, that because it's not something that we're naturally told, or we're not, our assumed roles, we're not given that lesson of, usually we're not given that lesson, and there is the assumption that the man will look after the finances in a home, and that puts women in a position where they don't have access to money.
Do you think that may have shaped like the strong convictions you have around imposed gender roles, assumed gender roles, let's
You're
say?
assuming I have strong convictions around it, is it?
I've heard your responses. It's not an unhealthy response.
I think maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. So let's roll on and check out what some of these hot topics were out of this book.
Okay. There was another big one on there about, and I think so many women are going to think about this, right? There was another one on there about getting back on the horse in terms of getting intimate again with your husband after having a baby. And, you know,
Oh, right. I see what you mean. Yep.
And I think that's a difficult one, because women have all these changes happening, right, after pregnancy or during pregnancy, and especially if they've had cesareans or they've had any of those complications with a birth, any complicated births. So that was a big one that came up in the book as well. What do you think the gender-imposed roles around money are?
Around
your
money.
experience as a man? Yeah. How were you raised? You know, was it something, was that role sort of imposed on you as a man?
It's interesting, that whole assumed roles and then based on gender roles. I find it really interesting, because in society and when you're a child growing up, you generally model the environments that you've grown up in and the things that you see. So sometimes there's an explicit instruction of like, well, men should be doing this, or boys should be doing this, and girls should be doing this, and women should grow into women who do.
Or don't do this.
Yes, or who don't do that. And
that's what I heard a lot.
Okay.
Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Yeah.
So my experience was really interesting, because my mum was a twin to a brother.
I keep forgetting that.
Yeah.
That she was a twin. Yeah, or is a twin.
Yeah, and she had an older brother. And they, every 2 years, they would move. The job that her father and mother had required them to move every 2 years.
So this is your grandparents. They had to move
on my
every
mum's side.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
So as a girl growing up, mum found herself always the new kid at schools. Just, you just get into that groove of making and connecting with friends through a different stage of your life, and then you're up and gone. And so her brothers were very close to her. So she would say that, for her era, she was actually somewhat of a tomboy.
Oh.
And sometimes they were in quite rural areas, And so, riding horses or riding bikes, and, she would talk about stories where, they'd have rock fights or something. Like, this is what boys do.
Okay.
Yeah. And, smashing someone's front teeth out accidentally and that sort of thing. And then mum has gone on to get married, and I'm the eldest of 3 boys. Even our dogs were male growing up. So in our household, you've just brought on a memory for me.
Oh.
Now I know, look, this is where it all comes together.
Okay.
So in our household, we were quite typical of the time. And mum was originally at home with the children. So she was a nurse before she gave birth to us, our kids. When I was very young, 2 years old, or just under 2 years old, my parents moved to Papua New Guinea. Dad got a research role there, and they actually lived in the highlands. So you're talking about, this is the early 1970s. So for many villages up there, we were the very first white babies that people had seen. It was wild, incredible. Yeah. So there are pictures of like a whole village surrounding our car and mum freaking out. Now, mum gave birth to my younger brother while we were there.
Okay.
And she talks about being in the maternity ward. So like Dad worked in the hospital, right? She's like there in labour, and she's like on the bed. But
and your mum's quite tiny.
Yes. Yeah, she's not a big lady.
Yeah.
And she said there's like louvers, there's windows there, and like this little village dude kept jumping up to look in.
Oh my gosh.
Because they're freaking out, right?
With your,
White
with
woman
your
having
youngest? With her youngest? Yeah.
No, the next one, yeah. So the middle child. That's my earliest childhood memories. I remember in the village there, sitting around the fire, someone playing a little guitar, ukulele type thing, and everyone singing and stuff like that.
So those gender assumed roles in a family of boys with a mum that came from a family of boys, what were you raised to believe?
Yeah.
As a man?
Well, what I saw around me was mum looked after us and dad worked.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to picture my age. I'm saying like maybe 11, 12, maybe I was 13. So I was 13, makes my brother 11, and then the youngest brother's like 7. Mum had an operation on her foot, and she couldn't get up and walk on it like at all for like weeks. And so dad has this conservative, you know, he's lived at home his whole life as well, right? And being raised by his mum.
Yes.
And went straight into marriage.
Did he have any sisters?
Yes, he had a sister.
Okay.
And he had strong, like the grandma lived with him and the auntie.
Okay.
So very
quite
strong,
strong woman.
maternal women.
Okay.
Maternal?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, so when mum was out of action, all of a sudden dad is like, and you know what it's like you may not know what it's like. People will know what it's like when someone's out of action. In that first couple of weeks, you got people from church and everything and friends and relatives all bringing you meals and, you know, everyone brings his spaghetti bolognese and something.
I don't think people like me. Never had that.
So everyone, you know, in that first week or 2 weeks, you're fine, right? Everything's sorted.
Yeah.
And then people are back into their regular gig.
Yeah.
And so they forget. So dad has gone on and he's like doing all the clothes washing, which he wouldn't have typically done.
Okay.
He's, you know, ironing. And
Well,
his mum would have
stepped
come
up.
around. Yes, and cooking.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we ate lots of steak and a couple of veggies, you know, that was it. However, dad did expand on that. And so I looked at that and that made a really big impact on me. My parents were part of a church, and so that whole environment, which is generally a little bit more conservative, was everyone has very similar values. And we're going back, like I'm pretty old, right? So we're going back at a time.
You're in midlife.
I am. I've extended that midlife. I'm going to live one hell of a long time if this is halfway. So for me, going to mates' places and everything, I was really conscious of some mothers and what they did, especially my mates who had older brothers. And I saw this play out a lot in that those guys would be at home and they weren't necessarily mummy's boys. You certainly call them mummy's boys now. They were looked after.
Okay.
And then when they
by their mum.
got a serious...
After. Up to a certain age. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
like,
and they stayed at home
older.
like that. And then maybe they moved out with mates or something for a while.
Yeah.
However, it seemed like very quickly in that environment, a lot of them got married fairly quickly or got into serious relationships. That's the assumption, right? Another mum brings on. And so, you know, I was really shaped at that sort of like 12, 13 years of age. And we became more aware of what mum did. And we also increased our abilities of actually like making stuff for ourselves, food.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, well, that was for survival, right? Because 3 boys, you're growing up, you're hungry.
However, your dad like led by example, right?
Yeah,
I don't think my dad ever changed a nappy, and there were 5 of us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't think he ever changed a diaper. Yeah, and my mum had a few operations.
Yeah. So that really shaped me. That influenced me, I should say.
Yeah.
And, you know, I definitely didn't, you know, finishing school, going into uni, leaving home, I definitely didn't go and move in with a woman to take care of me. Yeah. So I was a fairly independent, and I actually remember that's where I coined that phrase, independent domesticated male, and that has stuck with me for my whole life.
I think all the women listening to this are like, hey Brendan, are you available? We need an independent domesticated male.
No, believe me, there might be some downside with that, ladies.
I don't think so. I know you're an amazing cook. You're an amazing cook. Everyone who knows you knows you're an amazing cook. You run your home with your boys.
Well, they're cooking dinner. They'll cook dinner this evening for themselves.
And you're teaching them to take the lead on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell them that, hey, if you can just master 2 really good meals, you can travel the world. Yeah. So
what 2 meals did you master?
Oh, it's a great one. Well, definitely making pizzas from scratch, like every single ingredient and everything, and doing something pretty sweet with that. That's definitely a bit of a signature move there.
Okay.
And what I've had to stop myself doing is over the last 12 months, I've been getting stuck into pork bellies and trying to do the most perfect pork belly, and I have to stop doing it.
Why do you have that? Well, where did that come from?
It's something about the texture and just that challenge of like when you do a really good pork belly, like other people go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That
so all the ladies are now lining up. You're going to see
pork
the comments.
belly.
That's
my
doing,
side of girl.
ladies.
Come on, lady.
I'm a vegetarian.
Sous vide steak. Yeah, well, there you go. See, you're way on. I'm not going to woo you with food, that's for sure. Not with the steak.
No, not with the steak. No.
Yeah.
So I'm one of 5 and 4 girls and 1 boy. And
where do you come? Sam, in the
so
whole order?
I think this might be why I am the way I am. So I was the last. So it was my 3 sisters and then my brother, who was very much wanted and prayed for, very, very much.
Well, after 3 sisters, I can imagine. Yeah.
Very much wanted and prayed for. And then my mother fell pregnant by mistake with me. And they were so nervous that I was going to be another girl that they didn't even find out what my gender was. In fact, my mom it was a geriatric pregnancy for her. And
how old was mom?
39.
That's not geriatric.
Well, at the time, right? So
at
40-something years ago it was.
Okay, yes.
And so she had the option to abort me. And, there were definitely times where she reminded me that she had that option. And, and then I came out a girl. And they were bitterly disappointed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bitterly.
Yeah.
So I think if you have a look at my sisters and my brother, actually, they're amazing cooks and really good in the kitchen. And I had a few signature dishes that I used to do, and then I sort of stopped cooking. Yeah.
That's
I can
sad.
cook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just it's definitely not a strength of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mother actually had a catering business. However, she never taught me how to cook.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And her cooking was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was, in my home, my mother was the ultimate housewife, like absolute ultimate housewife. She was an incredible cook and outstanding. Her food was outstanding. She was incredible in the garden. She sewed like all our linen and clothes. She looked after the home. She raised
It's
her
like
kids.
my mum.
Yeah?
Yeah, she's great at sewing.
Really?
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Does quilts. What do you call them? What do you call quilts? And they're all different. Is it patchwork? Patchwork
Yeah?
quilts? Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why you're asking me.
She's incredible.
I don't know.
Okay. So we had a similar experience with mums.
So my mum was very much like that. She was a tough woman as well. And when she was able to, she did work. She had her own businesses. However, she never faltered on the mothering wife side at all. Yeah, she was a sterling example of a wife and mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess that does show something like within, I'm going to put myself with you, in our generation, that, your mum did go and, like you said, ran her own businesses.
Yeah.
And so my mum did as well. I went and worked again. So she was a midwife before having children. And then after she had all of us, sometime after, I can't recall, but my youngest brother would have been at school and she went back and did some midwifery. Was a midwife again and found it a little confronting and difficult. The hospital she was at was at a private hospital that had, back in that time, they called it alternative type births.
Okay.
Now,
alternative to what?
To what a normal birth would be, as in you got in there and it might have been, a bit of candles and incense.
Like a natural birth.
Yes. However, Mum
Yeah.
did share some stories that, were a bit hectic.
Okay.
And that's what made her leave. One that really did it for her was the husband of the wife giving birth insisted on having a double bed there so that after she gave birth they could make love.
Oh.
I know. Yeah.
Oh
Which
my
was
gosh.
just a bit too much for
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about that as assumed gender roles.
So mum then just went into, she ended up going into social work.
Okay.
Became a social worker for
To counsel
women.
those women.
Well, pretty much.
So talking about domestic violence and things like that. Now, you told me about a research article that you read where there were some questions on there, and I remember you only gave me a couple because I said to you, don't tell me what they are. I want to be shocked, right? And I want you to share them with me first time on the podcast. However, there was one that you shared there about the one question was, what was it? About we call it domestic violence. However, some cultures will say that a man has the right to...
That was a statement, a man.
Oh, okay.
So you had to respond.
Okay.
So
give me the statement. I'm going to respond.
Okay. There's a few
to that
here.
one. Okay.
I printed it out.
Okay.
Because I found quite a few very interesting research papers around this gender assumption
Are
roles.
you going to put on your glasses?
And look, for all the folks at home, when you're speaking to Dr. Samantha Worthington and you're bringing up research, you have to bring your game pretty well. So I bring all the props. So I've got some glasses as well. There we go. So what I found really interesting, because I'm always interested when you hear research and you hear people just quote statistics and everything.
Right.
I always think in the most simplest terms, and I'm going, who are the humans involved in this, and what do they actually get them to do, or how do they measure that?
Okay.
And
So who are the humans involved in these statements?
It is the European Union, so the country members of the EU, and it's a thing called the Gender Equity Scale.
Okay.
Yeah, so this research refers to this gender equity scale.
Okay.
So it's 29 statements that are measured. So you respond to those statements like, oh yeah, absolutely, that's correct. And like, what are you talking about? Ready to like punch someone out.
Okay.
So they are written in a way that they invoke
So how many are you going to give
emotional
me?
response. Not many.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some on there that I won't. I think the one that I mentioned to you on the phone, just to give you an example.
Right.
A husband has the right to beat his wife.
Okay. So
do we even have to respond to that? Right now, like before we started this, what I really wanted to do is make sure that there's people listening to this. However, we have got it on camera. The other thing that I really wanted to do was like have your pulse going and your blood pressure going live, so that I could see the physical response.
So with that one, I culturally, I can assure you from my own personal experience and my experience in counseling other people that culturally, that one is a big one. That is a big one.
There's people who support that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely don't. And I know you don't. However, culturally, there are cultures that believe that a wife needs to be disciplined by her husband.
Yeah.
If she's out of line which is domestic violence.
And there's another one here that's very similar. If a husband is angry, he can yell at his wife. Let's move on. So you were talking earlier about finances. A response that only a man is responsible for household finances.
I don't even know how to respond to these. So that one.
Well, when you do respond as a respondent to this gender equity scale
right.
sample question,
Right.
you are going from 0, yeah, I totally agree,
Okay.
to 4, like
4,
absolutely
only
not.
4. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's
4.
very defined. Your reaction to it's quite defined. Yeah.
So let's look at that. Right, that came up in that book, How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids, right? Because what happens to the woman that has to work full time to bring in money so that she feels? I mean, it feels safe, right? Let me finish my sentence, because that was my case, right? And what that does is it actually disrupts the natural balance of those first few months that a family have after a child is born, because the woman does need to bond, the mum needs to bond with her child, and so does the dad, right? So does the father. Women take on that role in society more than men do, just on average. And there's two different sides to that. So you've got women that have to work because either they're single moms or they want to have that financial independence in their marriage, or they have to because financially they can't afford not to work, right?
Yeah.
In a country like Australia that we're in, you've got systems where and government support where women and men and fathers have the opportunity to take leave, maternal and paternal leave. Now, if you're looking in countries like Africa, where I'm from, that doesn't exist. So you're not going to have women, and most certainly not men, and maybe only recently have they introduced laws for that, and it certainly isn't as long as, you know, westernized countries. If you work full-time, you have access to it's called UIF, Unemployment Insurance Fund in Africa, right? Which is, it doesn't even cover a bag of rice. So you've got, let's say, a single mother who, in Africa, it's really common where you have a single mom and the father has abandoned her, doesn't want the baby, or whatever the case is. Or there's domestic violence because culturally he believes he can discipline his wife. Or there's a polygamous relationship, right? Because culturally that's acceptable there as well. So you've got a woman in this day and age who doesn't want that and needs to raise a baby on her own, and she has to go back to work. So how does that, you know, you've got these natural roles that we have in terms of keeping a family together, keeping a family supported, being a mother, being a father, and then you've got your roles where that's how you survive. And they're different.
Very. I'm going to rattle a couple of these statements off, right? Because you don't need to respond to all of them, but they touch on everything.
Okay. I'm ready.
You are ready?
Yeah.
I don't know if you are. The status of women is lower than that of men.
I can tell you, as a family of 4 females and 1 male, in my home, that was certainly the case.
Yeah.
That was certainly the case. I had a member of my family, and I'm going to be vague on this one, come and visit me, and we were having lunch, and I've got a
Were you a mother at this stage?
Yes.
You're a mum?
Yeah, I'm a mum. So I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and I remember that we had lunch had been made, and I had dished up my food, and I was
this
scolded.
at your place?
Yes, my house in Australia.
Did you make lunch?
I doubt it. It was probably cold meats and salads or something, just something basic. And I remember...
Who would have made the meal?
Well, we would have all put the rolls and the meat and the salad out, right? We weren't there to cook us pork belly or anything like that. So, we just had to do like the basics. I remember being scolded because I had not dished up for my husband.
Oh, you got in and ate for yourself.
Yeah, I dished up for myself. Well, I didn't eat. I was waiting, however, which is something I was taught in my home, right?
Yes.
And tell my dad.
Were you sitting at the table with everyone?
We were sitting outside around the pool.
Oh, okay.
And I was scolded.
Scolded.
Yeah, I was scolded. Like, how could you do that? How could you not dish up for your husband and you are sitting here with food? Like, absolute shock and horror. And it's incredible because I remember very, very recently, before moving to Australia, so 5 years ago, right? I moved to Australia 5 years ago, and having a Christmas dinner with my husband's family, and the women would dish up for the men.
Really?
The men would sit at the table, and the women would get up and dish up for the men. And that is 5 years ago in my own family.
Yes.
So, and it was never questioned. So it was tradition. It's the way it is. And so when you talk about that statement, yeah, I can see it. I've lived it. 100%. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder if you would have something to say about every single thing here, okay?
Give me another one.
Or I'm going to put two together.
Okay.
I don't know if we're ready for these two yet.
All right.
I'll do
go
another
silent if I'm not ready.
one. Okay.
Okay.
If a wife disobeys her husband, she should be sent to her maternal home as punishment.
I'll go willingly. As punishment.
It says as punishment. I think
I think
it should
in
really.
A maternal home?
Yeah, but I think it should really read to her
Maybe
mother-in-law. Yes.
Yeah. Keep
How
reading.
many you got? All right. Only the wife is responsible for all household work.
1 is 0. Can I go 0? Is 0 1? Can I say 1 means I don't agree, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, no zeros? Okay.
A woman should always be ready whenever her husband wants to have sex.
Okay. So
I thought I was going to read out a few.
no, well, no. I have a comment about that one.
Okay.
This is my professional opinion, right?
Professional as what?
From speaking to other women, from counselling other women.
Oh, yes.
That there is an expectation from men on women, on wives, to satisfy a man's sexual requirements or needs. Otherwise, he'll look somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think women feel that is that's something they have to do. Even if they don't agree, right? Women will sit there and laugh at that statement. However, and especially, different cultures as well, if you're having a look at a relationship where a woman keeps putting off her husband, for him to then go and have an affair and turn around and say, well, she was never intimate with me, people would almost, feel sorry for him. Because that happens, right? I mean, I've heard women talk to me about having affairs and saying that they've had an affair because that guy has stopped sleeping with his wife and he hasn't had sex with his wife for years. Shame. Poor man. So
I'd feel sorry for any man who...
What about the woman?
Made love. Well,
what about the woman?
Here's another statement in here.
Okay.
Women engage in sex only for men's satisfaction. They're good statements. Whoever's put this together is really good because they're eliciting a response, which is either, puts you in one boat or another. It's very... There's not many of these statements you can sort of go, yeah, sort of agree.
Imagine.
I don't agree or disagree.
A girl.
A girl.
Reading that and learning that that's how she needs to be. I read a ridiculous instruction, right, an old-fashioned, and it wasn't even that old, right? It was like still in the 19-somethings, right, about how you should wait before your husband, until after your husband goes to sleep, to take off your makeup and only put your rollers in your hair after he's sleeping because you don't want to shock him. And I think I'm quite shocking when I get into bed.
Can I give you some good news around some of the other research that I looked at around here?
Yes, please, because
So
those are shockers.
In regards to the, well, they're the questions that give the gender equity scale.
Right.
So from that, they're able to determine what people's opinions are on gender for things like finance, education, who does household chores and everything.
So what did they come up with?
Okay, here's some increases that have been made. They found the biggest indicators of what would be more balanced views was education. So higher educated men and women both had views that the gender roles and what were typically traditional weren't as relevant. So there was more shared responsibility around those roles. So,
So like taking out the garbage.
Yeah.
Okay. Like just going down to basic things like cooking, taking out the
Caring
garbage.
for children.
Caring for children.
Yeah.
What about this one? You're both at work,
Yes.
right? Who gets the phone call to go home or to go and pick up the sick child and take the child home? Who gets the phone call? Usually it was the mother, right? Usually it was the mother. Was it your mother?
Yes.
Okay.
Now this is an interesting one.
Who was it in your family, in your immediate family with your boys and your ex-wife?
Yeah.
Who was
So in quite a few instances, I would be the one looking after a sick child. Yeah, for a certain period there. And look, for when the boys were very young, I worked away a lot. Like I was every week, I would have been away. In fact, I had another place down in, or used to stay, somewhere else because I was away a lot and I used to travel quite a bit. So it'd be nothing for me to be away for 2 nights a week or something.
Okay.
Every week. Yeah.
Right.
And during the week. So,
Now,
that
if
was
your
definitely...
ex-wife had done that, if she had worked away 2 nights a week,
Yeah.
how would you have felt as a man?
Well, it's interesting because I resonated with this study because it spoke about the circumstances of the mum and the father have a big influence on it. So education was one. Also the occupation they had. So if the mum had, quite a demand or like status, it was they referred to it as high status role and more of a demanding role, then there was more leniency on the imposed roles on that mum because it was recognised she may be, some position of influence or importance.
So she has
and
to
there
have...
was like an ego. It was said that there was like an sort of an ego status symbol attached to it, and that men were more husbands, were more inclined to pick up
Wow.
the roles
So
based on that.
A woman has to have that level of status to get equal footing in her marriage? Is that what they were saying?
They didn't say that they
That's what
had
they
to
meant,
have that
though.
status.
Yeah.
They said what it showed
Okay.
was that women who were in that position, certainly the roles were quite balanced.
Now, this is an interesting question for you. So if I look at that, for example, like what you've just said there, if a woman has a higher status than her husband, right? Then
Higher status occupation.
Occupation.
Yeah, it wasn't higher than the man. It was a high status occupation.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So that on its own, right? There's an issue there because now you're going to start talking about women in the workplace.
Oh my God, that's another podcast.
That's a completely another, right? So that's that now. How that impacts on her home life, right?
Yeah.
And the level of equality she's going to get at home, based on how she's developed her career in a male-dominated world. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're just like we're getting hit from all angles. Okay, so here's a question for you.
Yes.
These women that have these higher status or high status roles out there at work, right? Is it the husband that is picking up certain tasks out of choice? Or is it the woman who now has the confidence to say, hey, mate, I'm not going to do that anymore because I'm busy. And if you want to do it, you can cook for yourself. Otherwise, you can starve. Or if you don't have any clothes to wear, that's not my problem because I'm busy. Is she getting to a point of more confidence and being in that sort of high status work environment, realizing that that's not her role? She has other parts of her.
It doesn't have to be her role.
It doesn't have to be her role. Exactly, right? Because I can share personally for myself, if I hadn't said anything in my relationships, if I hadn't put my hand up and said, hey, I'm not going to do that anymore because we're on an equal footing, or I have a higher status than you work-wise, or I'm more qualified than you, or whatever the case is. If I hadn't put my hand up, I would still be cooking, cleaning, doing washing, hanging stuff on the line and running my businesses. So no one was going to pick it up out of fairness, right? So where do you think that comes? Do you think that comes from a woman being more confident to say, hey, I'm drawing the line. Unfortunately, I can't do all of that. You're going to have to look after yourself as a 40, 50-year-old man? Or what do you think the average is? Do you think it's more common that she says that, or do you think it's more common that the man respects her more and therefore wants to be more supportive?
I think it comes back to sex. He wants to have more sex. And he'll do anything for it.
Don't worry, darling. I've done the towels. Now you're available to me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
See the mind of a man.
I did a workshop once.
Yeah.
I was a participant in a workshop. Yeah,
okay.
This guy.
Was it a sex workshop?
No. It was like a sales and negotiation workshop.
Right.
And I remember asking, it was a guy who did it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember asking him something about, how you might be able to apply what he was talking about in a home life. And he stopped and he thought for a little while and he looks at it and he goes, all right, Brendan. And he said, let's say that you want like a nice bit of a special romantic night with
the missus.
Yeah, with the missus, with your wife. He said, you may want to consider you could be really organised and you could get the kids all sorted, get their dinner sorted, get them all happy and off to bed sweetly and everything, and put it to your wife beforehand of hey, look, you relax. I'm going to run a hot bath for you. Put a bit of, bubbles in there and candles and here's some freshly picked flowers around.
Yes.
Yeah, dinner's fine. Here's a glass of bubbles to have with your bubble bath. Yeah. Do that, yeah, and say, hey, look, I'm just going to get everything sorted away. You don't have to worry about a single thing.
Right.
And then we'll be able to have some beautiful, lovely time together tonight.
Okay.
Now I tried that.
Right. Did it work?
I'm not going to tell you when I tried it.
What?
I got shot down in flames.
Did she see
all
through
you want is just a root.
I was going to say.
Saw straight through it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyway, that was look. I think overall, though, the thing is that when we read these questions and everything, that's to elicit a response, but however, it's to gauge where someone's mindset is, right? People, and do that across a data set of population with statistical validity, and you get a good idea of how that society runs. I think with all of this, when we talk about gender equity and everything, it's no different to everything else in a relationship. If you approach this in an adversarial way, it's nasty, right? It's difficult because it comes with blame, it comes with accusations, it comes with responsibilities and all these attitudes and unspoken things. So I guarantee that for most of us, when we enter or when we start off a relationship and everything's happy and great, if we think back to if you're still married or even if you're not married, if you think back to if you did get married, those early conversations, or if you moved in with someone and, it was the first time you were both living together as a couple. If you haven't spoken about those things, hey, look, who's going to do this? Who's going to do that?
Before you move in.
Yeah, or even as you move in and as you settle in and you find out who lands where.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about it in a friendly and a great way of hey, you really compliment me on this because like I can't iron clothes. I'm terrible. Or
well, I can't iron clothes. I
Yeah.
can't do the washing, and I can't cook.
can you mow lawns? Can you build something? So I think that's a really
I think you're a very conscious human being, because I don't think so. I don't think there is a lot of space to have those conversations. I think that people, and that came through in that book, in that Jancy's Dunn book.
How not to hate your
How
husband
not to
after
hate your
children.
husband after kids.
After kids, yeah.
And one of the things it said there is that men are, and this is not my opinion, this is what was in the book, right?
Right.
It said that men are programmed from when they are children in a society that is programmed with these gender imposed roles. And he almost can't help it. He is just programmed that way. I've had many, many, many discussions with the men in my life, many, and that's including my husbands. I've been married twice, right? And that's because I can't cook. My husbands, my father, my brother-in-laws, my brother, and it seems to me that the conversations that you have, it's like the first time they've ever heard that. Because we live in a world where we lean towards certain roles.
Can I give you some good news out of this? The 2024 Paris Olympics was the first Olympics with equal number of male and female competitors. I wasn't aware of that.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, first time.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
What sort of sport you like watching. I think they can make as much room as they can for female pole vaulters. I don't know what it is.
Volleyball players.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but those pole vaulters.
And I'll just watch the males' gymnastics.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So anyway, what have we learnt out of this?
Nothing. I'm kidding.
What did you get out of this discussion, Sam?
That you can cook and clean. What did you get out of this?
I find it all very interesting because the moment you go online and read or you catch any reels or any responses around imposed gender roles, people are generally very upset about how they've accepted that for a period of time in their life and haven't realised that perhaps there's a different way of living.
Yeah. And that access to information now, especially, internet and countries that are oppressed, where women are oppressed, now have access, if they can get access.
A lot of those countries have got oppressed internet.
Yeah. If they were previously oppressed as well, and they now learn about culture that is traditional, that is still carrying on, it's not correct. I remember learning for the very first time when I was an adult that a husband cannot hit his wife when she's done something wrong or when he's angry. So I think access to information and the world becoming smaller because of internet and things like that.
Yeah.
I think it can be quite shocking for women and men.
Yeah. I'm an optimist. There's been a lot of positive that's come out of changes there. Yeah. I don't think.
And maybe a lot of anger.
Yeah. And look, I just think with all of this, just whoever is important in your life and shares your life, just talk to them and be kind. And from that understanding, I think you can get a really good life and the life that you want.
Yeah. Just be fair.
Yeah.
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 Awesome.
Don't underestimate how hard it is for a man.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for the day. So, until next time, you come and join us on Between the Sheets, where we go and chase all the things that are exciting, adventurous, and sometimes a little frustrating of midlife and everything in between.
That's it. See ya.